Remember last year's amazing trip? That cute first birthday party? All those photos, all those memories can be freed from your phone with a Shutterfly photo book. Rediscover and share your favorite moments with those you love. You'll be amazed how easy it is to make a photo book with Shutterfly and enjoy it for years to come. Get 40% off orders over $29 with code POD40 at Shutterfly.com and make something that means something.
This episode is brought to you by Amazon. Sometimes the most painful part of getting sick is the getting better part. Waiting on hold for an appointment, sitting in crowded waiting rooms, standing in line at the pharmacy, that's painful. Amazon One Medical and Amazon Pharmacy remove those painful parts of getting better with things like 24/7 virtual visits and prescriptions delivered to your door. Thanks to Amazon Pharmacy and Amazon One Medical, healthcare just got less painful.
It's just beautiful, and it is ridiculous, but it takes itself seriously.
Do you think it does?
In a way, it knows what it is.
It knows what it is, and it commits
aware.
to it.
This is episode 112 of Flixwatcher podcast. In our studio today, we have Alice.
Hello.
We have Myq.
Whoop.
And as always, we have Kobe.
Whoop.
And we're here to
That was
review.
Myq again.
And we're here to review Furious 6 or Fast and Furious 6, however you want to go. The sixth one.
Guys, if you want to get in touch, join us on Twitter at FlixWatcherPod. Come and visit us on our website, flixwatcher.tv, and go to iTunes. Subscribe to us, review, and share with your friends, because sharing is caring.
As always, films reviewed in this podcast were available to stream on Netflix UK at the time of recording. There may be bad language and there may be spoilers. You have been warned. Hello and welcome to this episode of Flixwatcher podcast. We have Alice and Myq as our guests in the studio. If you would like to say hello and tell the listeners where they might have heard your voices previously.
Well, you might have heard me on the Bugle podcast, or my own podcast, Tea with Alice, or my own series of 3 specials, which is called the Alice Fraser trilogy. I'm very imaginative in that way. Otherwise, you can find me online in various places, in various video forms and spoken and written words.
For me, you may have heard my voice here right now as you're listening to it. Podcasts I've been on Alice's podcast. I've been on Pete Holmes's podcast, You Made It Weird. That's pretty fun. I've been on my own podcast, Broccoli and Ice Cream. And I've been on many albums of my own. That's a weird thing to say. I've produced stand-up comedy albums that you can get wherever you get those. The most recent's called No Kidding, and I have a special on Amazon that you can watch called Small, Dork, and Handsome. And if you search for Myq Kaplan, that's Myq Kaplan, and that's me. And you can find me I'm not hiding.
Yeah, you both are on Amazon Prime. We shouldn't necessarily be bigging up the competition, but that's where if you want to find more of these guys and their stand-up shows that they've got live, that they've got released, then if you're listening and you like them, go find them.
But listen to this episode first.
Listen to this episode first, and then also we'll maybe petition Netflix to get these guys on Netflix, because it's better than Amazon, isn't it?
If you're listening, I'd be happy to be back on there.
Yeah. As ever. Yes, if you listen on, you'll hear our personas, if not necessarily our comedy, because I take Fast and the Furious very seriously.
Okay, well, let's dive into that. Alice, you chose Fast and Furious 6.
I chose the Fast and the Furious 6.
Can you tell us why you chose it and give us a brief synopsis?
So it's difficult to synopsis any of the Fast and the Furious movies individually, because they are in some ways very different from one another, but mostly interchangeable in that it is a lot of people driving cars and a lot of narrative about family. And
is it narrative, or do they just say it every other sentence?
Well, it is narrative in the way that, for example, The Bold and the Beautiful is narrative, and I have a belief strongly that this is The Bold and the Beautiful for people who like cars.
Syllabically, it's identical.
Yeah, exactly. Syllabically, it's identical, and also in many ways, plot-wise, it is identical. You have lost siblings, you have amnesiac lovers, you have revenge, and
it's a car soap opera.
It is absolutely a car soap opera, and that is what I love about it. I think there is obviously and quite openly a trashiness about it that revels in these archetypes and these sort of arcane, convoluted plot points that are in many ways almost irrelevant to your enjoyment of the film, which is just meow.
And can I add also, the films, they're not all interchangeable, because I think the first 4 are all just about racing each other, like, sort of like criminals racing. But then in the 5th one, I think, was really the one that got me into it. Like, I watched the first one.
It was the one that really got a lot of people into it.
Yeah, because it was more a heist movie. It was more exciting to me. Like, cars racing is not very exciting to me.
Even I'm going to stop you there because we haven't had the synopsis yet.
Oh, so sorry.
Yeah.
I mean, that really was the synopsis. You find out Letty's not dead. She has amnesia. She's working for the bad guy. Letty is the ex-lover of Vin Diesel, who is Dominic Toretto, who's the core of this family. It becomes... Yeah, it is one of these just delightful things. It has Dwayne The Rock Johnson in it, the other bald-headed muscle man playing opposite Vin Diesel. And it's interesting to watch the eye lines in these movies because they put Vin Diesel closer to the camera, so he looks like he's of a size with
The Rock.
Dwayne The Rock Johnson, although he obviously isn't.
He's more like paper or scissors.
So it's...
Nice. Okay, I see what we did there.
Thank you.
I just enjoy it so much. The whole thing defies logic, but it has its own internal physics. You can watch cars jump over bridges or get flattened by tanks or hang off planes.
Sometimes go out of a building into another building, like up in the air.
You're mixing that with Fast 7, I think.
Oh, no, I'm just saying in general. Yes,
okay.
yes.
Oh, so the Fast and the FF universe has its own physics, which is ridiculous.
Yeah. Physics, that's probably spelled FFYSICS.
Yeah. Gina Carano and Michelle Rodriguez have a punch-up, a silent punch-up, where they don't talk about men, so technically it passes the Bechdel test.
That's a technique.
Can I just ask, so did you pick this specifically because you wanted to pick the 6th one, or did you just want to pick anyone that was available on Netflix?
I wanted to pick anyone that was available on Netflix. Okay. I want to kind of make maybe an argument for the Fast and the Furious, because I think a lot of people dismiss them as trash or as guilty pleasures.
But and I embrace them as trash.
Yes, yeah. I think there's room for them.
I think you have to embrace them. You have to, if you recommend it to someone, say it's going to be nonsense, press play, and that's pretty much what you need to say. And if they embrace the chaos, then they'll probably enjoy it. If they don't embrace the chaos, then you can understand why they won't enjoy it.
Yeah, and it is incredibly impressive nonsense as well. I think people dismiss the challenge of making it at all coherent, and it is coherent, even though you have multiple cars moving around in different ways. There's sort of car ballet happening, and each of the cars has a different personality and sort of tech specs. And even though none of the things that they do are possible, they are internally consistent with the car and the driver and the personality of the car and the personality of the driver.
Nothing that MC Escher does is possible.
Yeah. But so it is beautiful in its own way.
As you were talking about, Myq, this Fast 5 was a clear delineation between, well, Fast and Furious 1 kind of had like a thought line through it, and we're going to do a serious car heist movie.
Point Break with cars.
Point Break with cars. And then it just becomes a bit boring and po-faced. And then Fast 5, they think, let's bring The Rock in here, and he's going to turn everything up to 11.
Yes, indeed.
So how do you rate the first 4 versus the second set of Fasts?
Well, there's an argument for the people who liked the first 4, that they were more gritty and realistic, in air quotes, that there was something more homemade about them, that even the graphics and the CGI were more sort of
Is it CGI what you're talking about? Isn't it all?
Well, in the first one, I think this is something that people objected to about the first one, is that it is very gritty and street-based, but that whenever the cars fire up, you go through this kind of bullet time Matrix-style journey through the engine, as and when the engine starts and as and when they fire up the NOS. You get this kind of journey through the car.
Helen's despairing here.
Engine. So people sort of didn't like how much more Hollywood they became, although I sort of thought that was the realization of maybe something they'd always been going for.
Helen, how are you affiliated with the Fast series. And are you looking forward to Hobbs and Shaw?
Well, when you put that in the notes, I was like, what is that? Is that like a cartoon about two dogs or something?
So not very much affiliated.
No. I mean, I remember watching the first one when it came out, and I never returned to the series. And I'm just looking at my notes, and the notes was, apart from the runtime, was ridiculous, which I think kind of sums it up. It's interesting. I'm not really sure that I'm down with that. It's ride or die, isn't it?
Ride or die, yeah.
That's not really a motto that I'm going to embrace in my life.
What about family?
just family.
That's what they say, isn't it?
Yeah, it's family.
It's really ride and die.
No, but no one dies though, even though
people do die.
Giselle Yasha dies at the end to save Han Solo, who was in Tokyo Drift.
His name's Han Solo.
Yeah.
Yes, it is. But Seoul spelled like the soul in Korea. Yeah, it's great.
I do like how it rebooted itself without anyone really asking for it into something which I'm guessing from what you're talking about, and the fans have kind of got on board with it a lot more, because how many are we on now?
8. They've done 8.
Which is
the Fate.
Quite a lot for a franchise, and one that looks like it's probably going to go on forever, and one in which its main star, one of its main stars is no longer going to be in it, although he's in part
7.
Yeah.
He's in 7, so he didn't appear in The Fates of the Furious. And I mean, I was talking to a friend last night. The Fast and Furious series makes billions of pounds, billions of dollars each. Well, the past few made billions, massive. So they're in the top 50 films, box office films for the past few years, which is insane because the first one was actually quite a small film, wasn't it?
Its global appeal is incredible because, it's really hard to get a film that
appeals to so many people.
That global.
I think there's a big testament in it to the diversity of the cast.
Hugely diverse cast.
Which is kind of, they don't really sing and dance about it, which is what I really like about it. It's just like, it's The Rock, Vin Diesel, you got
Michelle Rodriguez.
You had Gina Carano, who was then replaced in the later film by Ronda Rousey. So these are also, without kind of getting hacky about it, they're quite strong female characters, both physically and in terms of the plot points. And
they're not blonde and white.
They're not blonde and white, and they do play, even though in some ways these are very objectifying films, cars and women, and you have, you have
those segments still
scenarios of just asses, a camera moving through a crowd of ladies' bottoms. But then you also have these very strong plot points, and within the context of this soapy narrative and character arcs, Michelle Rodriguez is a conflicted character and she's a complicated character. And, in this movie particularly, she has amnesia and is working for the bad guy, but then she also feels connected with her ostensible enemy, who the bad guy has told her a bad story about, but she feels connected to Vin Diesel and she's moving towards him but torn from him. Like, this is a character that actually has an arc and her own fight, which is more than you can say for a lot of films that are received better.
Also, this is neither here nor there about this particular topic, but I just love how they're all named, like as though it seems in some way, I don't know if the same people were in charge every time, but I used to do a joke about like how I love them, and also I think it would be, if you can name exactly, like the fourth movie is just called Fast and Furious.
Oh, you mean the name of the title, not the name of the characters?
Oh, yes. Okay, yeah. I mean, also the names of the characters, but the first one was The Fast and the Furious. The fourth one was...
The second one was Too Fast, Too Furious.
Which is my favorite sequel name. Then Tokyo Drift, that one doesn't do anything for me specifically, but just for the fourth one, they could have gone Fast and Furious, but they just Fast and Furious. Like, if you're looking for, like, those, they seem like, the doesn't change anything. And then just Fast 5, like, we don't even need Furious anymore. Now Fury, like, it's just so, I want to see them, like, for F8, for the Fate of the Furious, I'd love for now everyone that comes forth to be, like, F8, A9, ST, or S10, T11. It's just, it is ridiculous.
I mean, 10 has to be Fast and Furious.
Fast 10 Furious.
Like
yeah.
It's all about the importance of seatbelts.
Alice. That's delicious.
What's your relationship with
I think
F&F?
what's the first one? this is going back to what Mike said. I used to watch Top Gear, not because I liked cars. And when I hear my friends talking about cars and all the engine block size and then fucking brakes BPM and everything like that, that's beats per minute, the brake horsepower, I switch off. And I watched the first one and thought, it's an interesting film, but I'm not going to watch a film about cars. Fast 5 onwards is not about cars, in really, apart from the fact there's cars in some scenes and they're used to facilitating the nonsense. It's just because it's just lots and lots of fun. And someone had to really wrangle me to make me watch Fast 5 because I thought I can't see the point of watching it. And I'm really glad they did, because I think it's hilarious and stupid and lots of fun. And it's quite interesting in the same way like Mission Impossible, seeing how much they can dial up the insanity with each subsequent episode. And that one you're talking about which is Fast 6, where they went to Burj Khalifa and jumped out one skyscraper, flew the car for a good minute in the air into another skyscraper, is one of the most ridiculous things I've seen.
And
so I enjoy it.
I'm looking at, just back to the names for a second. There's one poster for it where it says Fast and Furious 6, but then Fast is crossed
just
out.
Furious
so
6.
Fast 5, Furious 6. They keep adding. I wonder if they'll. I mean, obviously, Hobbs and Shaw. It's gonna. They're like 2 Hobbs, 2 Shaw. What Hobbs and Shaw, Tokyo Drift. Like they can just keep.
I also quite like the way, and again, this is a sort of a soap opera convention where characters are not beyond redemption. So you have, again, quite understandable motives. So in this movie, it has Shaw, the original Shaw, Luke Evans,
Yep.
who is at the end of the movie defeated and quite badly wounded. And at the end of this movie, Jason Statham, Shaw's brother, the Shaw of Hobbs and Shaw, comes in. The next movies are motivated by his quest for revenge, and the fact that he is sort of Teflon in the way the main characters are gives you a clue that he will eventually be redeemed and fight on the side of the goodies. And there's a great scene in one of the later movies where he fights for Vin Diesel's son on a plane, and he puts noise-cancelling headphones on the baby.
That's Fate the Furious.
Yeah.
He fights some dude on an aeroplane. It's just beautiful, and it is ridiculous, but it takes itself seriously.
Do you think it does?
In a way, it knows what it is.
It knows what it is, and it commits
it's aware.
to it. And I think when people say, "Oh, it has a sense of humor," or it doesn't have a sense of humor about itself, it doesn't take an easy out. It doesn't do it ironically. Even though it knows it's ridiculous, it's conscious of its own ridiculousness, it commits to it in a way that makes it enjoyable.
Here's 2 things. One is like the fighting, the fight scenes, like Jason Statham, I love watching his movies, like the Transporter movies. Like it is like ballet. He's an incredible, performer, fight. Yeah, exactly. A fight dancer. And what are the other, like the Crank movies? Like he's in a lot of these things where he knows what he's very good at, and people put him in vehicles, literally and figuratively, that and so because one of the points of this art, is that the fighting is the thing. And so in order for if he was just a bad guy forever, then he would either die or be he would go away. But the fact that they just keep everyone who's opposed to them eventually just becomes one of them, which is sort of again what happens in life. The idea of life is sort of like a big game of. Do you guys have Red Rover here? Do you know that game?
No.
So there's a game played by American school children where there's 2 lines of people, and then one of them yells Red Rover, send, and either one person or send everyone with this color shirt, or everyone send these people over, and then you have to try to break through their arms, everybody's arms, and then there's one, if you get through, then if you don't, you join their team. If you do, then you go back and win somebody from there, and then eventually the game ends when everyone is on one team. And that's the way that life is, where eventually everyone's on the team of death. But while it's happening, we're hopefully trying to get everybody on the same team of of family, of togetherness.
Well, that's what you have here with Hobbs. In the previous film was
the antagonist.
Yes.
He is the law-abiding person with a code of honor, and in that way, he and Vin Diesel have this connection, even though they're on opposing sides. They play off this kind of masculine respect, but opposition. And then in this film, he recruits them. So at the end of the previous film, they're all scattered throughout the world as fugitives living happily and wealthily, but he brings them back into the fold by making them white hats, using their naughty skills on the side of justice.
These guys are the A-team. They are basically the modern day A-team. They've been called together for the skills that they have. They're on the run.
Yeah.
And if you can find them, then you can hire them. And that's what Hobbs does.
Yes, basically.
That's one of my favorite like sort of tropes is, like reformed quote bad guys, people who were bad, who are now like doing the greater good, even like the spirit of the law, if not the letter of the law. Like even, and that sort of like ties together with this other thing, like the idea of like we're making fun of in some ways like family, the sincerity that it's being presented with, or like the blunt like over the head and being like family is important, and like the way to demonstrate that family is important is not to yell that family is important. So that there's like the mask that they're wearing, this this presentation of like family is important, but also that is the truth deep down. Like beneath that mask, there is the reality of that.
Well, also it is the driving motive for the narrative.
The driving motive.
Indeed. It's the driving motive, and the driving motive in that they are driven by their relationships with one another. All of their motives are tied back to their relationships with one another. And the cars, even though they express their love for the cars are disposable. The people are not. And
I also love that I think in all of the movies that I can remember, when they kill people, like it's always very clear. They're like, oh, those people were definitely like bad. They were people who were trying to hurt a lot of people. They were, even if it was like from foreign agents from like another government, they were actually like rogue agents within that organization. They weren't just like, like a real war where there's like people, like innocent people who join up and they're like, I guess we have to kill these other people who are also just like us.
Well, when people die on the other side, but I mean, Giselle died in this, and that was...
Yeah, but that was a tragic self-sacrifice of they didn't want to pay her for the next movie. But
the good guys aren't murdering people in this movie.
No, there is not the same sort of callous attitude to collateral damage that you see. So you'll have a big explodey fight, but it will often be out in the countryside, or it will be in an abandoned parking lot. And when they're in their streets, they're careful not to drive other cars off the road.
Yeah, they don't run many people over.
No, and when they do, or when they are callous about the loss of life, they're the bad guys.
The one before this, we had quite a spectacular scene where they're driving through the streets of Rio with the safes attached to the back of the cars.
Yeah, man.
The loss of life in that scene would have been pretty high.
That's true, but you don't think about that.
But yeah, there's some crazy stunts in this. Like I said, they do fly through the streets of London at a speed which no one has ever gone through London because it's impossible.
Congestion, man. It's just not realistic.
My favorite sequence is when they're on the motorway and they've got the tank suddenly appears out of nowhere and they're diving between both sides of the motorway, and they're divided by a good 5 meters of sharp fall. But they seem to be flying between both sides. And one of my favorite sequences, which leads up to my favorite line, is when Vin Diesel catches Michelle Rodriguez because she's on the front of a tank, which then explodes and catapults her into the air. Vin Diesel jumps across the central reservation, catches her, and lands onto a car. And then later on, she says, "How did you know the car was going to break my fall?" And he says, "I didn't." And I was like, that's just absolute nonsense. And it made me laugh, and it still makes me laugh. But these people should be dead, but the physics of the Fast and Furious doesn't allow that unless, plot requires they die.
Or real life.
What are your thoughts about the stunts in this? How do they kind of compare to in other films generally, I guess maybe Mission Impossible and other Fast series?
It does seem like they really have built their own thing, because I guess compared to, you mentioned Mission Impossible, like I feel like they're trying to at least appear like it could be in some world more realistic, and here it's like a cartoon. Some of it is just literally, it is kind of like MC Escher, like that couldn't happen. That could, like their like cars are defeating a plane, cars are like coming out of, like it's just.
But equally, while it is cartoonish, you feel like they've thought through the physics and impossible capabilities of each of the cars, that there is weight to the cars. and that they move along certain sort of...
Oh, yeah, like Harry Potter, like each spell does a specific thing. Like, oh, this wand is this powerful, or if you study this much, like, and say these magic words, and you're like, well, okay, well, none of this is real, but in the context,
it's not, and it's not just the cars, it's the people as well, because you have The Rock jumping off a 5-story building onto a moving car, and just he lands perfectly and then starts beating up the guy. But also there's the kind of thing where, as you talked about, the distance from the camera to present Vin Diesel as the same size as The Rock. When they're fighting against each other, The Rock would win hands down. Even like Gina Carano and Michelle Rodriguez, Gina Carano would win hands down, but because just the construct of the Fast and Furious physics of then it's a fair fight and everyone's like rooting for whoever you want to be rooting for at the time.
Well, it is presented as a battle of spirit rather than
the strength of the soul.
A battle of will rather than of physicality or physics.
How are you? So you've only seen the first one and this one, Helen?
Yeah, so I was going to say this, that coming into it at this point, I felt that I couldn't enjoy it as much as you guys because I hadn't had sort of the relationship and also had not seen the one which kind of, rebooted it.
If you'd seen
made
Fast 5, you would have been all set.
Yeah, so I did feel as though you kind of you do really need to have seen at least the fifth one to enjoy it as much as you can. So that I was a little bit like, yeah, I can kind of see where it's going, but not having had the ones before it wasn't as enjoyable as it probably should be for me.
I watched with my wife and she hadn't seen any of them before, and she said, is there anything I need to know? And I was like, not really. I was just like, once The Rock comes into it, it makes it better. You probably wouldn't enjoy the first one, but just go with it. And she loves like the Mission Impossible films for their kind of thing. So she was quite set. She quite enjoyed it. But there were the odd questions like, where does Letty fit into it? And I was like, to be honest, I don't know. I don't think it really matters. So just like, watch the film, and then if there's any answers, anything you want answering, then you can let it fly.
Yeah, it's like if you ever have like a real question of like, can you exactly explain what this is? Because this doesn't make sense. Like, you're asking this question doesn't make sense. Like,
yeah. I mean, the perfect place to watch this kind of movie is on a plane when a long-haul flight and I do this long-haul flight between Australia and the UK often enough that perhaps that it skews my liking of these films, because that's what you want. You want this serialized, semi-nonsensical narrative where occasionally they'll remind you what they're talking about.
On a plane, I watched The Flash.
Yes, because you're exhausted and you're sort of, this is exactly the kind of thing that you want to engage with.
I think it's typified by this. In this one, at the end, you have the plane trying to take off, and that scene lasts like 15 minutes. And you have many people on the internet going, the runway must have been at least 50 miles long. but based on the fact I've done these calculations, the plane going at 275 miles per hour, then you're like, I think you've missed the point of the entire film.
Yes, if you see all of the physics as a metaphor, it's dance. It is dance. I think that's the way to understand it. That it's not script per se. It is very physical. All of the fights and all of the cars are a choreographed ballet, and the meaning is conveyed through that.
If I may...
you may.
Alice, I know from our previous conversations, you have been raised with Buddhism of a kind, and I read recently the story of Angulimala, who was, a killer who then became an enlightened monk. And there's one part of the story where he is running after the Buddha to kill him, and the Buddha is walking, and Angulimala running can't catch up to the Buddha walking because of the Buddha's abilities, and he's like, stop, you should stop, and the Buddha's like, I've already stopped, you need to stop. And so the idea is like the Buddha's supernatural powers are that he can potentially like expand or contract different parts of the earth or whatever it is, like similarly to the Fast and the Furious, like the runway is as long as it needs to be, the cars go wherever they need to be, like when the point is the point.
Should we head to the scores, guys?
Yes.
Imagine what's possible when learning doesn't get in the way of life. At Capella University, our game-changing FlexPath learning format lets you set your own deadlines so you can learn at a time and pace that works for you. It's an education you can tailor to your schedule. That means you don't have to put your life on hold to pursue your professional goals. Instead, enjoy learning your way and earn your degree without missing a beat. A different future is closer than you think with Capella University. Learn more at capella.edu.
Welcome to our spreadsheet of dreams. So all scores are out of 5, and you may have decimal places, as many decimal places as you like. And we will start with you, please, Alice, because it's your choice with the recommendability.
Well, I mean, it sort of depends, because I know that some people will not like this. This is not everybody's cup of tea, but I recommend that people try it, particularly if you are on a plane or you have nothing better to do, which is not to underrate how enjoyable these things are if they're the kind of thing you enjoy. So I would recommend everyone give it a shot at some point. So I would say 5.
So would you caveat that with saying maybe start at 5, then work to 6, or would you happily drop them in at 6?
I would say start at 5 if you want to have maximum enjoyment. But even, if you have the time, go for 1. It's nice in a kind of a meta way to watch the films get more successful and enjoy their success. Tokyo Drift is an underrated one. I think that's probably got some great things in it.
Because I've not seen Tokyo Drift 3 or 4, and
I think I'm the same.
And I'm not really that bothered. I don't think I feel I need to.
Tokyo Drift is sort of an addendum, but it does make the rest of them more interesting.
Because Han Solo's
that messes the order up, doesn't it?
It does. It's a sort of a side note, Tokyo Drift.
Yeah. Myq?
I think for this particular film, that I'll say film, if you're not going, if you think that you won't enjoy it, then even if everyone tells you that you should, if you're like my girlfriend right now is reading a bunch of classic novels from the top, she looks at lists of top 100 novels, and so right now she's reading A Tale of Two Cities. She's read 5 other Dickens books in the past couple months, and Moby Dick, and if you're okay, so I want to read those, and what's this other? Oh, I got a top review, 5 out of 5 for The Fast and the Furious 6. Sure, these seem I think that people will automatically contextualize this recommendation, so that when I will also give it a 5, though it's a different 5 than I would for many other life experiences and also artistic experiences.
Helen?
And there's nothing to dislike about these films. It's whether you're prepared to go along with the journey of it, I guess. I don't have as much love as you do clearly do for this. So I'm going to go for a 3 in that if you have seen any other Fast and Furious and enjoyed it, then you should watch this. But if you're, as much as you want to go in for it. But I did feel that I could have enjoyed it more had I seen at least 5 or maybe one of the later ones, just to kind of get the characters, because I didn't obviously have the thing about obviously the Rock being sort of after them in the first one, and now he's kind of teaming up with them.
So what did you think The Rock was doing at the start of this film? It was quite interesting.
Well, I was just who is he, and how do they know each other before, kind of thing, and what relationship did they have previously? And obviously I didn't have the Letty backstory. I was so why wasn't she there? And I was they thought she died, she hadn't died, she'd come back. So it was nice they explained that for me later on. That was good.
They do explain it. I think I recommend this in the way I recommend having ice cream, in that no one would say
whenever you want.
You don't have to, yeah.
But it is, in the way that it's not necessarily physically good for you, but it is good for you because it makes you happy. So have it as much as you want it.
I'll also add, it's sort of I saw Return of the Jedi when I was, 6 years old, I think, when it came out, and I had toys from other, and so I knew who Yoda was, but I think it would have been better to see them in the order that.
So that was the first one you saw?
Yeah.
Okay.
And I understood, but it would be, it's a bit I read chapter 4 of this book and realized, I read chapter 6. I'm I should have started with 4. So 4, 5, 6, and then that's it.
That's quite funny because I thought when I was a kid, my parents had, for some reason, the first Star Wars and Return of the Jedi. Mm-hmm. Didn't have Empire Strikes Back. And until I was like 12 years old, I didn't realize, because I knew
There's a middle
Yoda,
part of the story.
I knew Yoda was in there, but I didn't know what he had to do with anything, because he's just a Force ghost in Jedi.
Oh, yeah.
And people had the toys like, oh, I mean, he's from Star Wars, but I don't know what he does.
And you're like, Han Solo's just a guy who runs around in the beginning and then is somehow frozen in carbonite later.
Exactly. He just appears. I'm like, okay, well, this is what happens. I think Fast 5 is the one ideally to start with, because Hobbs appears in it, and that's when the series takes an interesting turn. And also going back to the original one, because what's it, Luke? What's his name?
Luke Evans, the actor, or
no, not who plays
Paul Walker.
Paul Walker. I don't know why I call him Luke. What's he called in this? Anyway, Paul Walker is the
He's
cop.
called Brian.
Brian,
Yes.
yeah.
Brian.
Yeah.
I think they really should just at some point switch to using their real names,
Yeah.
and then Vin Diesel.
Yeah, exactly. So Paul Walker was chasing
Yeah, he
Toretto,
was-
he was the cop, and now I can't quite remember how they're friends, but then also don't worry about it.
He was undercover in the first movie and befriended Vin Diesel as part of his mission, but then truly befriended him and let him go at the end.
Yeah.
And then again they returned.
Point Break with cars.
Point Break with cars, basically.
I'm going to go 4.5.
That's pretty high.
It is. Yeah. I mean, look, it's happily watch it whenever it's on TV, and it will always put a smile on my face at how ridiculous it is. And I think this is probably my favourite one, actually. I think 7 goes a bit silly, and I like the interaction. Also, we haven't talked about like Ludacris and those guys.
Yeah, well, I mean, again, the diversity of the casting is astonishing for how committed it was to that from very early on.
Yeah.
They're even in the first one, the villains are the sort of a triad gang type characters, and it would have been very easy to make them two-dimensional, but they are not.
Yeah.
Even as two-dimensional villains, they are given some emotional depth when the bad guy is arrested in his family home with all of his Southeast Asian family around him. You see the pain of that for him. It's not presented as a victory. It's presented as quite a sad thing, even though he's machine gunning people all over town. So they have, in the central casting, they have 2 black guys in the main cast who talk to each other and have a relationship with one another and are not the same person.
Passing the Blackdale test.
Passing the Blackdale test.
Is that what you call it? We recorded recently. Episode may or may not be out. Talking about Nightcrawler. And there's a Riz Ahmed in Nightcrawler. Have you seen the film?
I did see. I think I did see it.
So he's
Riz test.
Yeah, they called it the Riz test. Our guests in that, and they said it passed the Riz, films with the ethnic diversity, which don't allude to that or make that part of the film. They call it the Riz test, but I think the Blackdale test is,
if you'd like,
but not necessarily Blackdale. It's just any ethnic minority.
That makes
film.
sense. Yes.
Well, in that you have those characters, and one of them is sort of more ridiculous and goofy.
Yeah.
But again, not without emotional depth, not without a sense, even though he is the comic relief and leans into some stereotypes, he also has a very real relationship with the other characters.
But also, I mean, Gal Gadot is Middle Eastern. There's Latino characters in there. The Rock and Vin Diesel are mixed race. And it's not even... Yeah, so Brian is the palest person of the crew, and it's not alluded to at any point in the film. It's not like... We need those black guys there. We need the Latino lady. It's just these are the guys. These are the family, and let's go.
They have different sets of skills, and they have different character types, and those seem to be at least partly disconnected from their ethnicity or not obviously referred to in that way.
So, did you say yours? This is your favourite?
I think this is my favourite one.
For your favourites, please?
I think I have a fondness for 5 just because it was the one that sparked,
Sort of redeemed the franchise for so many people. As I said at the beginning of this, I find it difficult to disconnect them from one another, in part maybe because I watch them in this serialized way when I'm on an aeroplane.
So you start from the first one and go through on your long-haul flights?
I tend to start from whatever one has come out most recently and then almost do them in reverse order.
Okay. Oh, nice. How much are you looking forward to Hobbs and Shaw?
I'm looking forward to Hobbs and Shaw. I love Dwayne The Rock Johnson. I think he's hilarious. Follow him on Instagram. I should recommend.
He's crazy
that.
on Instagram. He's good fun on Instagram.
He's great fun on Instagram. He's always being so positive. He's very thankful for his success, or he's showing you his workouts and that he wakes up at 4:00 in the morning to do these workouts, or else he shows you enormous piles of food that he's eating, or his daughters, or the women in his life, or occasional interactions with fans.
There was one with him just on a horse once.
I mean, obviously it's this deeply curated thing, but it's a deeply curated positivity that I think is maybe one of the things I enjoy about these movies.
Yourself and Hobbs and Shaw, Myq?
Yeah, I mean, I like the genre of stupid action movie, and this is much more than that. But it's like
I mean,
also
Statham
the pinnacle.
And The Rock. What more could you want?
Oh yeah, they're
And
good.
Idris Elba as well.
Yeah, no hair, so streamlined, so fast, so punchy.
Yeah.
Repeat viewing score, Alice.
I can only speak to my own reference, which is that part of the fact that these are quite shallow means you can watch them again.
At the drop of a hat kind of thing.
Yeah, because they're easy watching.
So what's the score?
I would say 4.
Myq.
I'll give it the same for the same reason.
Helen.
I'm probably not going to watch this one again, but should the 5th one appear on Netflix or happen to be on TV, I would probably watch that and maybe some of the subsequent ones. So even though I'm not probably going to watch this soon again, I'm going to go 3 for interest in maybe checking another one out.
Yeah, I think I'm a 3. I haven't rewatched them since I saw them in the cinema, and Fast 5 I saw on the small screen. I'm not sure how much I would watch them again, just because I've got lots of other films I'd love to watch. But I was super cool. I was like, yeah, of course, I'm looking forward to watching it. So I'll give it 3 for enthusiasm to watch it again when you suggested it, Alice. Small screen score.
5. I wouldn't go necessarily to the cinema to watch these. I think they are maybe built for the cinema, but in my experience, I tend to watch them on the extremely small screen.
Sure, of
the aeroplane, or if they pop up on television, or I think they are this sort of they pop up and they're a delightful treat when they do.
Myq.
I do prefer, I think I will see it in the cinema when it comes out, any new one in this series, because recently I had Movie Pass. I don't know if that was a thing that you guys heard about.
It's a similar thing here.
And now there's a different one that I have just for specifically AMC theaters, pay $20 a month and you can see 3 movies a week. And so with that, when a movie comes out that I want to see, I can and often do go see it. That said, I don't think it doesn't suffer at all. I certainly will watch them on planes. And if it did come immediately to the small screen, I would have no problem with that as well. So I'll say 4.
Helen.
See, I'm kind of wondering whether they would be quite fun in a cinema.
Oh yeah,
that kind of shared enjoyment, and obviously they are filmed for the big screen. And
I mean, if you are going to watch them early in the run when the cinema is full of 15-year-olds just going mental.
Oh, not with the 15-year-olds. Go with those elderly people.
Oh, yes.
No, I mean, I watched Black Panther in a sold-out cinema in Peckham Rye, and I don't think I can ever...
That would have been a wild experience.
It was absolutely wild because of the jubilation of an audience who hadn't been served by this franchise but were a big fan of that particular Marvel universe, big fans. And when the credits came up, people were on their feet screaming with happiness. And I think watching it in a cinema would be a lot of fun if you watch it in a full cinema.
Sure.
Saying that, but then also I would not be prepared to pay £15 for it. But however, the Peckhamplex every film is $4.99.
Yeah.
Still
£5 easy.
Yeah, I would pay £5 to see it, but not 15. So 3.5. I think I think that when I watched it on my TV at home, I would have got more enjoyment watching it in a cinema than I did with just kind of TV size, because it's so ridiculous and so larger than life that I think you need to give it some credit for that and go and treat yourself to watching it as big and loud as you can.
Yeah, I'm the same as you. I'm a bit low. I'm going to go for a 3 because I really do enjoy watching the cinema, and I have an unlimited pass, which is a similar thing here with the Cineworld. And like I say, if there's a film I really want to watch, then I'm going to be there on Friday straight after work and watch it as soon as it's out. And I will be doing that with Hobbs and Shaw. And this is the first time since watching Fast and 5 that I've seen it on the small screen, but I didn't think it really took away from it. But I think I'll still be like more excited to go and see it on a bigger screen for the first time at least.
Sure.
Engagement score, Alice.
Well, this is slightly counterintuitive. You would think that they aren't very engaging because they are so shallow, but that's one of the things that I find really good about them. You just sort of slide into the world and drift off on dreams. And again, obviously, this is contextual. I watch them on planes in order to distract myself from being on a plane. And so they're very high engagement for me in that way.
So this one where the denouement is on a burning plane, does that affect you in any way, shape or form when you're watching on a plane?
No, because it is so unrealistic. The plane, as with the runway, is what it needs to be. It's all a metaphor and it is all sort of dance. So I would say probably 3.5, 4. Let's say 4.
Myq?
For me, I will also say for this particular viewing, when I first saw it, it was in a theater, and I was engaged because that was what was happening. But to watch it at home when I've already seen it is a different experience than like if I were watching it at home for the first time. So I think sometimes when I'm like rewatching things that feel good and that I like and that I know, I can do other things. Yeah. Without, I think, losing focus or engagement. So that's why 4 for this.
Helen?
Yeah, so I think watching it at home didn't force me to be as engaged in it as I should have been. So I was sort of trying to go into the story and kind of find out who had been in all of them and a bit of IMDbing and reading the story. So I think because I could have that distraction, I was obviously less engaged. And also at 2 hours and 10, it's a good 30 minutes longer than I would like it to be. So I think if it could be a bit trimmer, nice half an hour and a half, I would have been a lot more focused in it. And that, I mean, who doesn't love a good 90-minute film anyway?
Well, I'm not sure 90 minutes will work that well, but there's a few sections where
it's a little bit flabby, or it could have just been a little bit tighter.
There's that one section where Paul Walker gets himself arrested to get
just
to
like
have a fight,
bit of information,
and then kind of leaves again. I think they could have
maybe completely cut that out, and that would have been 15 minutes. That would not have made that much difference because then he just appears later on. 2 hours 40, maybe. Oh, sorry, an hour 40. Yeah, something like that.
A bit tighter would have been good.
I think that. So a 3.
A 3. Yeah, I'm going to go for 3.5. Based on the second viewing and kind of knowing what's going to happen. And because this is the first time I rewatched them, I couldn't quite remember which was the Burj Khalifa flying cars one, which was the Rio one. So when it starts in London, I was like, what happens in this one? So it was quite nice, like waiting for the next stunt to happen. And I can never really remember what happens with the relationships within the family. And I forgot that Luke Evans was.
I really enjoyed him.
Yeah, I thought
he was a pretty good villain and played it really well.
What did you make of the other gang, the counter gang, where they had their big guy? Of course, he was going to fight The Rock. You knew that was going to happen straight away.
Oh, I don't know. I just liked Luke Evans. He was good.
Fair enough. So what did I say? 3.5. So that gives an overall score of 3.8.
That's pretty high.
Yeah. I think, I'm not sure where it lost anything particularly. Perhaps just a bit longer.
Yeah, I mean, the fact that you, Alice and Myq, have so much love for it.
Yes,
really
it's
nice.
Ice cream. It's you don't want to deceive people about what it is, but I think it doesn't. I think you if you were expecting it to be something other than what it is, you might be disappointed. But because it is what it is, and it's so good at being what it is, within its own, as with, it's got its own internal physics, it's got its own internal logic, it's got its own internal narrative, and it serves that so well that you can't write it down for that. It's either your thing or it isn't.
Yeah, no one is nominating it for Best Picture or Best Screenplay or unless it had its own category, like Best Fast and Furious movie. Like which is I think our goal for anything. Like, most like comedians that I know, most are, some comedians want to be, quote, the best comedian. But then if you truly look at, like, is Maria Bamford's comedy like better or worse than like Dave Chappelle's comedy? Like, Maria is the Mariaist and Dave is the Davist. And it's not, there can be people who like aren't as experienced or like if for whatever skilled means, like this movie isn't competing with many other movies.
And that's one of the reasons why it does so well. Yeah, when people ask you what kind of comedy you do, my whole goal in life is to have people go, oh, that's the Alice Fraser style.
There's Paul F. Tompkins has his, I think, most recent special. He opens by saying, I'm Paul F. Tompkins and I do Paul F. Tompkins-based comedy.
Let's go to Twitter before we head off. So we ask everyone, before we do a recording, we reach out to Twitter and put a little tweet asking for your input, guys. And in this case, we said we're reviewing Fast and Furious 6 with Alliterative, which is Alice, and Myq Kaplan, which is Myq Kaplan. Have you seen it? Tell us your thoughts for an on-air shout-out on Flixwatcher. We had a decent response here. Alice, do you want to take the first one?
Top Film Tip says, MacGuffin heisting car flipper draws rage and retribution of car crew family in tank rampaging, runway rioting fun. Hashtag Fast and Furious 6, a.k.a. how the world came to be saved by car thieves, ludicrous fun, 3 overly enthusiastic manual gear changes out of 5.
He pumped a line to that 280 characters, didn't he?
Yeah, and I quite like the ludicrous fun.
Yeah.
That's very clever.
I also like the capital letter F in family.
Do you want to take the next one, Mike?
I'd love to. It's 5 stars, 5 furious, which I think that's perfect.
It's from our friends the Cine Mile. Thanks for that one.
Yeah, and this is you, Helen.
Yeah, this is me.
You put
questioning
5 raised eyebrows.
their 5-star review in that one.
Do you want to take Sam's one there?
So this is from Sam Clements. Thanks, Sam. Best of the series? ? The Rock makes everything better, and then once prompted, he goes for 4 stars.
Yeah, nice. So applause, praise all the way through, and yeah, I guess it's no surprise that this each chapter is making $1 billion+ with each installment. So
yeah, I don't think anyone who watches this movie hates this movie, because if you know you're not going to like it, you're not going to watch it.
Yeah,
I don't think it's hate. I mean, I was pleasantly surprised. I thought it would be quite silly, but I didn't think I would enjoy it as much as I did enjoy it. There's nothing, you can't hate this film.
No. I think that's the thing. When I watched Fast 5 and people made me watch it, they were like, "Kobe, you really like it?" And I was like,
Gauntlet presented.
Yeah. Okay, Mike and Alice, can you just let whoever's listening know where they can find you online? Not to stalk you, but just to say hello.
Yes, I have a Twitter at alliterative, ALITERATIVE. I have a Patreon, patreon.com/Alice Fraser, where I put up blogs and updates and videos. Otherwise, I have a trilogy, the Alice Fraser trilogy, a podcast called the Tea with Alice podcast, and I'm regularly a co-host on the Bugle podcast.
And I am not those things. I'm some of those things. My podcast is called Broccoli and Ice Cream. It also has bonus episodes that you can get on Patreon and or Kickstarter Drip, the Patreon of Kickstarter. And if you search for @Myq Kaplan, MYQ KAPLAN on all social media, you'll find my podcasts, albums, special on Amazon, and anything else that you might want. And I thank you very much.
Cool.
Thanks so much for coming on.
Cheers.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
Bye. Thanks as always, guys, for listening to this episode of Flixwatcher Podcast. Take a moment to hit subscribe on your favorite podcast app, and also leave us a little cheeky review, because that really helps us. It really does. Also, do find us on social media. We are on Twitter @FlixWatcherPod, and also Instagram just @FlixWatcher.
Special thanks to our awesome editor, Brendan Russell, for making this episode sound so sweet. And thanks to the mighty people for the tunes you can hear.